Howdy, my name is Knownnat, and today we've got an interesting video here for you. I've ranked my top 10 favorite classes before, but that was last year, that was a long time ago. I was younger, more foolish, and I was alone. But today, I've got a very special guest with me. How about you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Mark, and I'm the local disaster tour guide.
What do you do, Mark? What is your channel all about here on YouTube?
Well, honestly, this channel is a bit of an experiment for me. I, like many people, got laid off due to COVID, and I needed something to do to entertain myself. So I enjoy talking about RPGs, and I thought, why not try it on YouTube? I usually approach things from a storyteller's perspective because I'm pretty much the forever DM in my group. But I try to look at things from the perspective of telling good stories or teaching people how to be a part of this hobby. That's usually the tactic I take, but I will admit that my videos are still very experimental because I'm trying to see what works.
Hey, it takes some time, you know? I would argue most YouTubers don't know their own style for at least 20, 30 more videos. I feel like I'm still discovering myself over a year later. But that's really cool, and I feel like you might be one of the only channels out there for Pathfinder right now that is making those types of videos from the storyteller's perspective. You know, we've got mechanics, you know, you've got me, you've got how it's played, talking about the rules, talking about the classes and whatnot. But getting that almost outside view from the top is really nice to have. So if you guys want to check out Mark, he's on YouTube as The Local Disaster Tour Guide. Look him up, give him a subscription, and check out his videos. It's a good time. Now, for this video, me and Mark have both shown up, and we have taken all, I think it's 16 classes in the game, and giving them a rating out of 10. We have not talked about this beforehand, we have not shared any thoughts or opinions or anything, so we will be conversing with each other, talking about each class for a minute or two, to say, you know, why we ranked it that way, why we like it, why we dislike it, and all of that jazz. So Mark, you ready to dive in here?
I'm ready to go.
Sweet deal. We'll be going in alphabetical order through the 12 core classes and then the 4 advanced player's guide classes. Because sadly, Magus, Summoner, Gunslinger, and Inventor are not official yet, so it wouldn't really be fair to give them a total rating right now. So starting off with the Alchemist. If people have watched my videos, they know how I feel about the Alchemist, so how about you go first here, Mark?
Well, I absolutely love the Alchemist. I'll go ahead and say I give it an overall 7 out of 10. What I love about the Alchemist in Pathfinder 2nd Edition is they made it a not magic class. You know, in 1st Edition, it was an offshoot of arcane magic, and I had some fun with one of the Alchemists, but I like the fact that they actually said, we want to give this a different flavor than just another magic class in 2nd Edition. And I think that was a genius move for Pathfinder 2e. And I love the options to the class. Really, the only thing that holds me back is, of the various classes they published, I feel like it's the messiest.
But no, I couldn't agree more. The options available to the Alchemist are so much fun. The fact that they added the Poisoner in the APG really cemented the class as one of my favorites. I'm coming in here with a solid 9 out of 10 right out of the gate. The Alchemist has been and still is one of my favorite classes in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. All right, well, let's move on to the next class, the Barbarian. I guess I'll start us off here. Barbarians have shockingly, some of the most choice and most diversity in the system. I don't think anybody going into Pathfinder 2e expected the Barbarian. In the core rulebook, I think it has 5 subclasses. What is it? Draconic, Fury, Giant, Animal, and Spirit. Yeah, 5 subclasses of Barbarian in the core rulebook, which is insane. And I just love all the different flavors. They all feel radically different. They all deal different types of damage, resist different types of damage. Their feats are super fun. You can be this massive bully. Barbarian gets a solid 8 out of 10 for me.
I'm actually going to kick it up a little bit higher because Barbarian's one of my favorites in Pathfinder 2e. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. If for no other reason, then I'm going to mess the name up, but it's the Fling Ally feat from the APG.
Yes.
Because that just, when Paizo dropped that in the APG, I was so happy. That made my heart just burst with joy. I agree with you. The level of options for the Barbarian is amazing. It is, they did so much more with the class than a lot of RPGs usually do. And I think my favorite example from a storytelling perspective is the Draconic Instinct Barbarian, because the barbarians have anathema. There are restrictions on your behaviors based on whatever your instinct might be. But for the Draconic Instinct, there's the servant of the dragon, and then there's the dragon hunter variants.
And I love that. That applies to most of the instincts. The spirits and the giants have that same thing. So within your subclass, you have another 2 choices strictly for flavor.
I think that's just one of the best design things Paizo did in Pathfinder 2e, is they said, here is how you can take one line of flavor and completely change the class that you're playing in the game. And it's just, wow, I love it. So really 9 out of 10 for me.
Such a great class. Can't agree more. All right, Mark, I will reserve my comments. How about you start us off talking about the Bard?
Okay, I was nice to the Barbarian. I'm not going to be as nice to the Bard. Bard, 4 out of 10. The thing that I like about the Bard is occult magic. The 4 traditions of magic, arcane, divine, primal, and occult, that is very good game design, as far as I'm concerned. I think it is extremely well done. The thing I don't like is I just don't know if Bard was the right class to carry occult magic into the game. It's a weird fit, and the further Pathfinder 2e goes, the more I'm like, I just don't know if this is working.
It could definitely come across weird, especially what's the, they have like Ghostly Iron Maiden is an occult spell, which, again, occult magic, it's really, I see what they're going for. Occult magic has a lot of that mind alteration and, that charm kind of stuff that bards are noted for. But a lot of them are also these really bloody, occult spells, almost shamanistic or necromantic in nature. I feel like they lost a lot of, at least what we expect bards to be in a fantasy role-playing game. I feel like their music doesn't do quite enough. They have, their focus their composition cantrips and their composition spells, and they're cool for what's there. I just wish there was more. And I'm not even going to touch on how much I don't like the subclasses. I mean, not to bring up the wizard video, but again, the subclass of the bard, again, aside from character development, which of course is great, I feel like they don't do much. They give you a spell, they give you a class feat. Is that it? Is that all they give? And they qualify you for some other class feats.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just don't feel super impactful. I am being ruthless. Bard gets a 2 out of 10 for me. Over the past year, I have garnered more respect for the champion. I will never stop bashing on them because as a meme, it's hilarious. And people's reactions of, the champion's not that bad, always makes me laugh when I trigger people. They're not that bad. They're not that bad. I do still think on every front but the defensive, the champion is not that good. They are the weakest martial attackers, unless you want to count the alchemist. And unfortunately, I do feel like half of their levels, champions get more from an archetype than their own feats. Unless you are specifically designing around your campaign with like the auras or the, the anti-dragon, anti-undead, anti-fiend, those are great if you're fighting undead dragon or fiends, but if you're not, they're far less useful.
The champions can get pigeonholed into very specific, I'm good here and easy to overlook in other places.
Before I let you go on, champions get a 3 out of 10 for me.
Well, for me, I give them an 8 out of 10.
Whoa! All right.
But I will explain my reason why. When I was doing my rankings, the question I was asking myself is, how does this class compare to similar classes in other games?
Okay.
And how interested am I in playing a champion in this game versus a paladin in D&D 5e or a paladin in Pathfinder 1st Edition, something like that. And the changes to edicts and anathema make champions so much more playable than other versions of the class.
I'll agree with that.
It's just a long-running dilemma in games like the paladin ruins stories because the rogue can't do anything. Or as I like to say, the nicest thing you can do as a paladin is dump perception.
I've never heard that before, but I love it.
But I just feel like the Edicts and Anathema, Paizo's way of approaching that is so good that it makes the class a lot more accessible. I do have a big complaint of I don't know why they did the evil champions before the neutral champions, because the evil champions just feel like they're not going to fit in most games.
And it sucks because those would be so fun to play. You know, that gives the champion that extra offensive option that good champions just don't get. I mean, you know, the anti-paladin is not great and can often hurt himself more than his enemy, but the tyrant is so good. And it gives the GM... So, comparing it to the Redeemer, the Glimpse of Redemption, which is the enemy can either stop their attack completely or deal less damage. You know, as a GM, I'm like, they'll always deal less damage. Why would they stop attacking? But with the Tyrant, it's you know, take additional damage or kneel and drop prone. That's such an interesting two choices. So, yeah, I think the Tyrant is one of the best designed subclasses of champion in the entire game.
It is. It's well designed. I just don't see it fitting most groups, you know?
Unless they have been given a reason to work with, like, a neutral party, it will be incredibly difficult. All right, talk about the Cleric there, Mark.
The Cleric is one that I'm very opinionated on because it's one of the ones I feel really let down with in second edition. I almost feel like there's two different classes to talk about here because there's War Priest and Cloistered Cleric. And anyone who's watched my videos know that I like to rag on the War Priest. War Priest is great at first level, and up until about level 10 it's okay, but after that it just... No, I don't... Because there's nothing here.
It doesn't get Master Weapon Proficiency, right? And does it even get Master in Armor?
I don't think so.
It's just so rough. It's not as good as spellcasting as the Cloistered... Like, yeah, it doesn't get Legendary anything. And it's still not as good as any other martial class, even at bonking things. It's brutal.
Depending on circumstance, the Cleric for me can score somewhere between a 3 to a 6.
Okay.
The War Priest, lower on the scale. Cloistered Cleric, a little bit higher on the scale. I do like that they've pushed the caster side of the Cleric further in this game. But what really hurts me is... in Pathfinder 1st Edition and D&D 3.5, which I played for a decade, domains were such a wonderful part of the Cleric and such a flavorful part. It was a defining aspect of the class, and you really got into the character, and you could differentiate two clerics of the same religion from one another with their domain. Domains in 2nd Edition, it just breaks my heart. There's not very many... and they're not very good, and to this day...
Like,
yeah, and they're optional.
If you don't take the feats, they don't do anything for you. Yeah.
And then there's just the confidence domain, which I'm just like... no!
Rest in peace, confidence clerics.
Now, I will say, the release of Lost Omens, Gods, and Magic brought a lot of stuff to the table for the Cleric. So I feel like if I'm ever going to play a Cleric, I'm busting that book out to get things that I'm going to enjoy more. But without that book, it doesn't rank very high for me.
Totally fair. What I will praise Paizo on is making Clerics more than Wisdom. I love the Divine Font system, getting additional spell slots of your highest level based on Charisma plus, I think it's +1 or +2 or something like that. You know, being able to have 5-6 extra heal spells at level 1 is incredible, and to defend the War Priest can make for a really cool self-sustaining fighter. They will never hit as often or crit as often, but being able to just slap yourself on the chest at level 5 to heal for, what, 3d8 plus 24 and then still attack shouldn't be underestimated. Like you said, at later levels, it does hurt because, you know, you'll be struggling to even make contact with big bads.
I was going to say, in terms of class effectiveness, Clerics are good. I've got one in my campaign right now, and they are brutal. I've seen them wreck plenty of fights.
Oh, for sure.
But my Cleric soloed a boss fight almost. You know, they are effective. It's just like the flavor of the class from previous editions just breaks my heart.
They did lose a lot. I'm not as big a fan of the fact that, yeah, your subclass just determines how you worship, who you worship doesn't really affect your build really at all mechanically, which is too bad. I still gave clerics a 6 out of 10. I might reduce it to a 5, but I'll go with what I wrote down just because, you know, I like their gameplay. And flavor on a cleric is nice and easy to, I won't say homebrew, but to make your own. You know, you can make a cleric worship for whatever reason. And I just wish there were more subclasses to play with, honestly. Secrets of Magic, come on, give us a third one.
Just give us the Inquisitor. Give it to us.
Steal the one I homebrewed. Go for it. Now we'll talk about another one of my favorites, honestly. Another one of the higher ones I've put on here, Druids. Druids, strictly for their customization, are amazing to me. 4 subclasses right at level 1, tons of feats that let you dip into the other subclasses, which bards can do too, but I don't know, something about Druid. There's so many ways to build a Druid. You can build an up-close and personal Druid. You can build a backline support. You can build an offensive spellcaster, an animal companion controller. So many different things to do, and that's the reason I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. Mechanically, I love the choices, and even flavor-wise, they're great. You know, you're deriving your power from the aspect of nature you are most akin to, and I really just greatly appreciate that. They even did the Druidic Order some service by explaining that if you take the feat to learn a different order, in-game your character should have spent some time with another circle of Druids to learn their ways. So flavor, mechanics, fun aspect, it's amazing.
I also really enjoy Druids. I give them a solid 8 out of 10. Pretty much 90% of that score for me is the fact I can go Kaiju with a 10th level spell.
Yes.
You know, that is the spell that I didn't know I needed until I saw it. And when I read it, it's just like, thank you, Paizo. Why did it take so long for this to get here? But I agree with you. The way they do the orders and just the different ways you can flavor and build the class, it is a fantastic design. And as I mentioned earlier, the new 4 traditions of magic, the primal tradition where they've fully separated, and Druids are not divine magic anymore, but they've got their own tradition. I think that is really flavorful and really well done.
I think that is the best, one of the best choices they made. Yeah, I love the primal spell list. It might not be like the strongest especially compared to like Arcane, but the spells they've selected are so, again, flavorful. It's one of my favorite words, and it just fits so well, whether you're a druid or a witch or a sorcerer. All right, so tell us about the fighter, Mark.
Generic is as generic does. The fighter gets a bland 5 out of 10 from me because it is a bland class. I just really don't like the fact that the fighter doesn't have defined subclasses.
Agreed.
In Pathfinder 2e. I don't get to play a lot of Starfinder, but in Starfinder, the soldier has several different, very flavorful subclasses to it. It's my favorite take on a fighter-style character. And to see them do it so well in Starfinder and then go to Pathfinder 2e and just fighter is so generic was a letdown for me. The class is effective. It's brutal even. But just I wish there was more flavor to the class. The one thing I like about fighters is they are the perfect base for an archetype. Martial characters do better with archetypes, and then you have the I think it's combat flexibility and improved flexibility features. You know, like fighters can take archetypes all day long, and it's not going to overwrite their flavor because they don't have any.
I actually also gave fighters a 5 out of 10. I do agree that I wish they had subclasses, but when you look at the design of the class, they kind of do. There's subclasses in their feat choice, you know, whether it be sword and board or great weapon or bow and arrow, and it's definitely not well defined, and it's definitely not beginner friendly, which I do respect. I like that the fighter is one of the more complicated classes, not necessarily to play, but if you really, for those min-maxers, fighters are really fun to balance, and especially with those combat flexibility feats, you could even become really good with multiple, you know, you can make a bow and arrow fighter that can draw a sword as needed and still have applicable feats. So I like that customization. I just don't like the crit magnet. Like, I do not mind fighters being more accurate. I just So let me put it this way. I'm playing a fighter in my Pathfinder 2e campaign right now. I'm a fighter. We're playing with free archetypes. I'm a fighter, Oracle, Eldritch, Archer. It's a ton of fun. But let me tell you, rolling a 2 on my d20 and getting a hit is not satisfying. It gets so old. And in fact, it hurts more than a miss, because I'm thinking I would have crit on a 12, but I can't even roll that. And it just feels like the game is pitying you. So, I don't know. Fighters, they're fun to play. I would recommend them for short campaigns, maybe not long campaigns. But,
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Fun in short bursts. Now, honestly, playing sort of like a fighter, but more options. I don't know about more options, but more advanced, the monk. The monk is incredible in Pathfinder 2e. I think it is the single best iteration of the monk in a fantasy RPG I have seen. The stances, the key magic, all that different stuff is so great. You have enough feats that you can either go all in on one stance or be a multi-stance savant. I think they have a feat called Stance Savant. It's great. It's not my favorite in the game. I gave it a 6 out of 10, but I'm not the biggest monk fan, but I think they are really, really cool in this system.
I gave Monk 6 out of 10 as well. And in terms of mechanical, just how it functions, I think they are really well done. I love the stances. I think they're flavorful. There's a lot to enjoy about their design. The thing that hurts me for Monk is I played D&D 3.0 when Oriental Adventures was being published.
Okay.
And those products just went crazy on monk options, and I've never seen the equal in any other fantasy RPG iteration.
Okay.
So that's always kind of been my gold standard on monks. Pathfinder 2e monks are good. I enjoy them, but unfortunately, that's a high mountain to climb.
What I do think that we have to look forward to is possibly more of those crazy monk maneuvers, especially as more supplements and more books come out. We might get another supplement a year or two down the line with more feats for the base classes. And if we're already seeing things like the Gunslinger's rocket jump, who knows what monks could have in store in the future. There's so many possibilities there.
I'm wondering if they're going to drop anything with the Ruby Phoenix tournament that they're doing right now in the Adventure Paths, because that just feels like the perfect place to be like, here's some crazy stuff for the month to do.
They do like leaking occasional feats in the Adventure Paths, I know, which can be fun. So I'm excited for that one. I know a lot of people are looking forward to Ruby Fist. All right. How do you feel about the Ranger?
I kind of surprised myself. I ended up giving the Ranger a 7 out of 10. The Ranger's kind of one of those classes I tend to overlook. I tend towards classes that can make things explode. That's just my personality. And so, Ranger is just a little bit too subtle of a play style for me sometimes. But when I really sat down and started looking at the 2e Ranger compared to other versions of the Ranger, I really began to appreciate how well designed it is in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. You've got 3 different subclasses you can go with in terms of the flurry, precision, and outwit. I think outwit gets dogged on a little bit in the community, but you've got 3 options there. But then when you look into the feats, you can go, animal companion on top of any of those. And there's several different ways you can kind of mix and match the class to come up with some pretty interesting play styles. And I'm not going to lie, the idea of my grizzly bear having precision damage just makes me giddy. So,
I cannot agree more. I think, personally, the 2E Ranger is the pinnacle of Paizo's game design. I think it is the single best designed class in the entire system. For decades now, Rangers have been like, I'm kind of a fighter, but I'm kind of a druid, and people often argued, why not just play one of those? Pathfinder 2nd Edition has finally given the Ranger its own identity, with these unique features to augment their number of attacks or how hard single attacks hit. And each subclass you pick, even Outwit, will completely change how you play compared to other Rangers. And, adding in an animal companion or monster hunter or all of those different feats on top of it, the Ranger is every ranger is different. There, unless you are going like the single highest damage build possible, every ranger is going to be completely unique, from a different animal companion to a different weapon of choice. It's just so cool. I mean, I played a gnome ranger with a talking familiar on my back who dual wielded a rapier and a dagger. It was tons of fun. Like, nothing about him screamed ranger, but he, that's the class he was. He looked more like a rogue, but I don't know. I could talk about the ranger for literal hours. I love the 2E ranger.
It really is a well-designed class. Like, it's one of those, I could overlook it very easily, but when I sit down and think about it, it really... I think I agree with you. This is probably the strongest version of a ranger I've ever seen in an RPG. It is really well done.
Now, talking about the strongest version of something, the rogue. Oh my word, the Pathfinder 2E rogue. Strong from levels 1 to 20, inside of combat, even more so outside of combat. From all the different ways you can easily gain sneak attack in this system, to all of the different feats you can get that augment sneak attack, and your incredibly impactful subclass choices, of which they have freaking 5, and the rogue's key ability score can be anything but Constitution. There's nothing you cannot do with this class. And if you have any points in intelligence, you will be at least trained in every skill in the game by level 2 or 3. It's insane. 9 out of 10 for the rogue. If I play another character soon, it is going to be a rogue.
I agree, 9 out of 10, and I would agree with pretty much every point you've made. Truth be told, in my years of gaming, Rogue has always been my least favorite class. Well, like I said, I like things that go boom.
That's true.
Just give me a wizard, give me a barbarian. I want people to know that I am there if I am actually playing a character once in a blue moon, and so just... Rogue has never been my playstyle, but when I looked at the 2nd edition Rogue, I was blown away. I should not like this class as much as I do, knowing my personality. Just, it's got the 5 different subclasses, like you say, and so many options. I don't like to get into edition wars much, but I feel like the Eldritch Trickster is flexing on D&D 5e so hard right now. It's one of the few times that I'm just like, objectively, Paizo wins this round.
This one just mechanically functions better. Yeah.
There is so many great things about the Rogue, but I think my favorite thing about it is how new player friendly it is. Oh, yeah. When 2nd edition first dropped, I was running Pathfinder 2E for one of my friends, and his wife was playing as well, and she had never played a single TTRPG in her life. It was her first game ever, and I gave her a rogue, and in less than 5 minutes, I swear to you, you would not have known she was a new player for how well she picked it up.
That's fantastic. And I think part of that is due to the number of skill proficiencies. A common problem I've faced when I play in Pathfinder 2E, and I'll admit this almost as a flaw in the system, especially once you're past level 2 or 3, you start ignoring skills you're not trained in. Once the DCs are higher than 20, if you don't have a bonus to it, there's no reason to even think about it. My fighter oracle is not trained in medicine. I'm not going to think to treat poison, treat a condition, heal some hit points. None of that. It's all out of my head because I know I can't succeed. And that is a fair flaw in the system. And so for a new player to be trained in pretty much everything, it means whatever they want, they have a shot at, which is really good.
Yeah, absolutely love the Rogue. Probably the only reason it doesn't get a 10 out of 10 is just because I'm biased against rogues.
Probably the main reason. I don't give any class a 10 out of 10. Spoiler. Ever since I was young, I've never accepted perfection. In my opinion, nothing is perfect, because once you say it's perfect, there's no room to improve, and that's just not true. All right. This one's going to be pretty divisive, I think. So start us talking about the sorcerer there, Mark.
The sorcerer, I gave a 5 out of 10.
Okay.
When 2nd edition first launched, that would have been a better score. I love the fact that sorcerer can be any of the magical traditions. I think that was a brilliant design move by Paizo, and if you're looking just at the core rulebook, I think it makes the class stand out in a really fantastic way. But I feel like that's really the only thing that the sorcerer has going for it. And now that the witch can do any tradition and the summoner is going to be coming out, it can do any tradition, which I love for both of those classes, don't get me wrong. It's like the one thing that the sorcerer really had is not its thing anymore. And so it's kind of slid down to the point where it feels a little more generic. And it kind of suffers with the same problem of like cleric domains felt more flavorful in previous editions. And sorcerer bloodlines, I think, have that kind of that same issue of they felt more flavorful in earlier editions. And they're not bad now, they're just not quite as strong as they used to be.
I'll agree with that. When you first look at Pathfinder 2e as a system, seeing, I think it's like 11 bloodline options in the core rulebook is incredible. You know, so many different options. Though I find... I do disagree. I do think bloodlines are much more impactful than domains are. But the problem is people forget. People forget specifically about the blood magic effect. I've been playing this game for over a year. I've never seen a player apply their blood magic. Whether or not they've used one of their bloodline spells, I've never seen it activate.
I have a sorcerer in my group right now, and I don't think I've seen them use blood magic either.
The problem is they're so forgettable, and you forget how they work because it's only on some spells and not others. But some of them are really good. You know, I think Draconic gives you +1. It casts Shield on you. You get +1 AC for a full round anytime you use that spell. They're not necessarily weak effects, but I don't know. There's something about it that just is forgettable. I will say I love the bloodline focus spells. I don't hear enough people talk about them. Some are clearly better than others, but especially compared to some other class focus spells, sorcerers have some of the strongest. All that being said, I also gave them a 5 out of 10.
I will give them credit for a couple of things. I like what Paizo did with the genie bloodlines in the APG.
Yep.
I thought that was well designed. And I also like the I guess it's a feat tree, if you will, for the class from the APG, where it's like the ancestral blood magic, where if you have ancestry spells, you can get special effects as a sorcerer.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I thought that was a cool kind of design niche for the class. So.
I think if they go forward with the ancestry connection to the sorcerer, they could make it distinct again. But if they just keep going as they are, where it's basically just another spontaneous caster, it's going to stay feeling generic, unfortunately. Funny enough, even though it has less options and is a bit more restrictive, I give the Wizard a 7 out of 10. I think it is more unique than the Sorcerer nowadays because of its restrictions. Obviously, you can check both me and Mark's videos. I'll put them one after another up in the corner of the video for more of our in-depth thoughts on the Wizard. But I love it. Wizards are my, overall systems, Wizards are my favorite class. They're not my favorite class in Pathfinder 2e, but I do love Wizards. And they've done some really cool stuff with them in this system. I do love how they've added the thesis in. Thoughts on them withheld. I do love the thesis as a concept, though. Adding that in, almost giving them 2 separate subclasses to pick from the school and the thesis, is really cool. Some of their feat options are rad. Bespell Weapon is just one of the coolest feats, and I adore it. But yeah, the weird thing is there's not a lot to say about a wizard. It's a wizard. It casts spells, and it does it just like a wizard should. 7 out of 10.
I gave the wizard a 9 out of 10. Mostly because of I feel like this is the strongest version of a wizard I've seen in an RPG. There's not a lot of room to change what a wizard does because it's such an established concept. And so when Paizo dropped the thesis in, it's like, hey, here's a really intelligent thing we've never thought of before, but it makes sense for the wizard, They found ways to expand on the class that other RPGs haven't, and they made the class more engaging than previous versions of the wizard, which is honestly impressive given the history of the class.
Yeah, in all of the class's history, it's never been the most diverse class. You've never gotten, aside from obviously your spell selection, you've never had a lot of choices when it comes to wizards. I just finished playing one in 3.5 D&D, and every wizard gets a familiar. Every wizard gets feats at this level. They're all very similar, Every wizard picks, one school it's good at and one school it can't cast. That's like where the customization ends. But yeah, finding new ways, and the thesis is the best way to go. All wizards study to learn their craft. So, almost like, deciding on their graduation thesis project as their main focus of study was brilliant.
Now, I will surprise you a little bit. Wizard is not my favorite caster in Pathfinder 2e. As strong as they are, there is one that beats it out for me, but I will say I am very impressed with the class.
All right, well, let's move on to some advanced player's guide classes. We've got 4 more to cover here. Mark, how do you feel about the Investigator?
Well, I know from comments on some of my previous videos, I'll probably get some pushback on this one. The Investigator, in some cases, is an 8. But in most cases, for me, is a 4. My reasoning is this. In certain types of games, the Investigator is perfect. If you are running a horror game, if you're running an urban game, and especially if you're running a mystery game, Investigator is fantastic. It's a great fit. I don't go to Pathfinder for those types of games typically. Like I might run a one-shot where there's a mystery that my party's trying to solve, or they might spend a couple of sessions in a town where the urban side of the class would be more prominent. And so, like in those situations, it's a really strong class, but it's one of those, like, I don't really come to Pathfinder for the Investigator playstyle. And so most of the time, it just kind of feels like a class that's not doing much for me. And on my channel, I famously said, I really feel like the Investigator should have been an archetype, kind of like Vigilante or Cavalier.
I actually landed right in the middle. I gave Investigator a 6 out of 10, because unfortunately to me, Investigator kind of feels like a worse rogue. Like, I guess it almost feels like even like a subclass of rogue, but it gets less skills, less skill feats.
With restrictions.
With restrictions, yeah, they have to be specific types of feats, skill feats. And if you've watched any of my videos about the Investigator in the past, you'll know how I feel about, get a clue or whatever. Something's odd, I do have issues with, which there are people who defend, like, just because me as a player can't think to do something, my character should be able to. And I absolutely agree with that. But you shouldn't need a feat for that to happen. So I get the love for the Investigator, and hell, I've got an Investigator in one of my games, and she puts in work. She's an Investigator martial artist archetype, and the devise a stratagem mixed with grievous blow is some nasty damage. I would just rather play a rogue. I would rather play a rogue and flavor them as a Sherlock type than play an Investigator. I don't know. There's plenty of skill feats and whatnot you can get as a rogue that work that way.
And I have to do a shout out for my wife's opinion on the Investigator. And I believe she's 100% correct on this. Paizo completely dropped the ball by not making a Ghost Hunter subclass for the Investigator.
I hadn't even thought of that, but that's so true. Why not? Bonuses to tracking a lead that is about anything paranormal. Oh, like that's it writes itself. Oh,
yeah.
My word. Bonuses to strategic strike, like let it hurt incorporeal beings even if you're not dealing magical damage. Oh, Paizo, come on. All right. So, on to my favorite APG class, which means it's all downhill from here. The Swashbuckler. Now, the Swashbuckler almost is similar to a rogue in a lot of cases. It still gets the extra skill feats like an Investigator, but their playstyle in combating counters is so distinct. The choices you have to make as a Swashbuckler are so engaging to me. Do I cash in my panache, and do I think I can get it back? Or now that I have it, do I just take the little bits of bonus damage on all my other attacks and save it? Do I think this hit will kill the enemy? Maybe It's just constant strategic analysis, and I'm so into that. And again, all the different subclasses. Granted, these aren't super impactful subclasses, but changing how you get panache is already just so fun, whether it's through intimidation, bon mot, tumbling through, tripping. Oh, making a strength-based bully Swashbuckler would be so fun. Swashbuckler's all over the place. It can be whatever you want it to be. It's possibly my favorite martial class. Rogue's my favorite, but not for its combat. I don't know. There's a lot to it. The Swashbuckler gets a solid 8 out of 10. It's so good.
Swashbuckler was 7 out of 10 for me. I will admit, when I first read the Swashbuckler, I didn't like the class because I completely misread it. I didn't. I misinterpreted how panache worked.
Mm-hmm.
And in one of my early videos, I went on this long tangent about how much I dislike panache. And thankfully, some of my viewers corrected me gently in the comments. Maybe not so gently in a few cases, but
I know that
when they pointed out how panache works correctly, suddenly I was like, oh, and the light kind of came on for the class, and now I can say I do really appreciate it. And for an advanced class, I don't feel like it's that advanced. Like, if I had a brand new player of the APG classes, I feel like I could hand them the Swashbuckler and they would reasonably be able to play it. Like, they wouldn't have as bad of a learning curve as they might with the Oracle or the Investigator,
Mm-hmm.
And I do like that dynamic of, do I take the risk and do tons of damage, or do I keep my panache for, I like that back and forth, the decision making you have to make there. So I do think it is an excellent design for the Swashbuckler, and I do like 2E Swashbuckler more than 1E Swashbuckler.
Okay.
I feel like they did a better job differentiating it in this system. So
yeah, in first edition, it was just more like a fighter rogue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, we got 2 left, and I'm guessing you might like this one, Mark. Tell me about the Oracle.
I absolutely love the Oracle. I would not unleash it on a new player,
No.
but
God, no. Took me 3 videos to cover it.
Paizo took an interesting direction with this class. In first edition, you got to pick your Oracle curse separate from your mystery. So, and I've got one player who loved Oracle in first edition, and so that was every character he made was just combining different curses and mysteries together to do all kinds of absurd shenanigans. And so in second edition, when they announced that they were tying curses directly to mysteries, I was apprehensive, because that's kind of the opposite of what they've done for most of second edition.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of second edition, they've opened the choices up rather than tying things together like that. Seeing the final results, I'm impressed. I give the class an 8 out of 10.
Okay.
I think my favorite, this may not be the mechanically strongest option, but I love the Ancestors Mystery, just for your ancestors are arguing inside of your brain about what you're supposed to do right now.
Oh, yeah.
And their voices are so loud, it's messing you up. I just love that mental image, and I'm pretty sure that I've got a few ancestors who would do that to me if they could.
I think the Oracle is very well designed, and by tying the mysteries to the curses, they opened other doors of design to synergize them, so that your curse works with your mystery and whatnot. That being said, I only give Oracles a 5 out of 10, partially for their overcomplexity. There is a lot there. Sometimes I feel too much, and not enough reward for the trials they have to go through. You get a lot of penalties as an Oracle, and what I have found, granted this is just with the Oracle archetype, aside from just using the spell slots I get from it, using and activating my curse in any way is usually more harm than good. You usually have to get it to moderate or higher to get any kind of bonus. And the penalties, they're really tough to get through. I have especially big issues with the Battle Oracle, who even at their major curse is still not even as good as a fighter at melee combat. I don't think they're even as... I think they catch up to martial classes while in their major curse. I'm like, that's not great to me. It's not amazing design. They should be slightly better. That's just sort of how I feel about them. They're flavor-wise, they're fantastic. Oracles can be some of the most interesting characters in the game. I love the flavor text around each mystery and curse. Just mechanically is why I sort of rank them lower. All right, and let's wrap ourselves up with the Witch, which I did give a 6 out of 10. I think it's cool. I prefer a wizard, but the direct connection and dynamic you can have with a familiar leads to some incredible character building opportunities, whether the familiar is like a pet. I have a witch whose familiar is a haunted doll, which is super cool. It can you can have it talk, you can have it not talk. They can do so many different things, as well as giving the feat options to dive really deep into making your familiar more talented, shapeshift into rarer familiars like imps or slimes, and it's cool, but it feels like a wizard with extra steps.
Well, you may remember earlier I said there's one class I like more than the wizard, and this is it. I love the witch. I don't give it a perfect 10 out of 10, mostly because I feel like the class, it needs to be fleshed out more. I can't wait to see what they do in Secrets of Magic, for example. But the way they did patrons in second edition, I just absolutely love from a storytelling perspective.
Yes.
More specifically, like the patrons and lessons concept. Like, you've reached out to this entity, and this entity is like, here is this secret that I want to tell you, and the entity is slowly revealing their purposes as they help or manipulate you into whatever magical path you're walking. And just the storytelling potential of that is amazing to me. Honestly, I didn't even think about when I was rating the class, but as you pointed out, the familiar options are a lot of fun too. Like, they've done so many great things with familiars in second edition, and Witch is the class that can really run with that and get a lot of mileage out of it. So the story potential of the Witch is top notch for me, and that's what makes it my favorite of the caster classes. Not to mention it stole the sorcerer's whole I can use any tradition thing. So
yeah, no, those are all totally fair arguments. I find the patrons, thematically, they're fantastic. They do somewhat feel a bit too much like Bloodlines to me, in that, you know, a witch very much just feels like a prepared sorcerer in a lot of cases, just with a familiar. I think I would like the witch more if every other caster besides bards and clerics didn't also get familiars. Familiars are so easy to acquire in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I don't think that's a problem. I mean, hell, if you're a gnome, you can get a familiar for free. I just think it being their main component, I wish there was a little bit more to them besides extra abilities. I think witch-specific familiar master abilities would be really cool to see.
Agreed. It's really one of those classes where I think I'm seeing the potential that hasn't been realized yet.
I agree. Yeah, and I think I could see my score going up in the future, especially when once they're similar to the sorcerer. If they can go a direction that separates them from the other casters, the rating will definitely go up. But hey, how about you guys in the comments tell us what you think? Let us know in the comments. Give us your 16 ratings in a comment. I would love to see what people think about each class. And tell us why you have a favorite or least favorite class. Mark, how about you go ahead and plug yourself and where people can find you again?
Well, my YouTube channel is called The Local Disaster Tour Guide, and pretty much that's the only place to find me because I'm still new to this whole social media stuff. So, but you can find my videos here on YouTube and be a part of the conversation. So
sweet deal. Yeah, I'll be leaving a link to his channel both in the description and the pinned comment of this video. And remember, guys, if you did enjoy this content and want to see more Pathfinder 2e content and general tabletop content as a whole, please do leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for joining me on this today. This was a blast. I love getting to I just like talking, honestly.
It was fun.
It was a blast. So thank you all so very much for watching. And until next time, no nat ones. And fake.